Hi, my name is Mike Tholen. I'm on Musicians on the Record today. Hit it.
Hi, welcome to Musicians on the Record. I'm David Ward. This is the show where we get the musician's story, and we bring you stories from the world of music, artists from the world of music. And today I'm really excited. We're going to get into the meat and bones of engineering, producing, recording with engineer-producer Mike Tholen. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, how are you, David?
I'm doing great. I mean, we had the pleasure of talking a little bit before with Donnie V. You guys are working on the album. You've worked with some major folks, Buddy Guy, George Thorogood, Enough's Enough. You've done the sound for Sense8 with the Wachowskis and movies, and I want to talk all about that. I'm curious, can you give us a glimpse, though, first, as far as what goes into the anatomy of making an album these days?
A lot of times, more often than not, especially nowadays, the artists will have something to record their demos on. And software's gotten very cheap. It's gotten very easy to use. Most of it's even free. So consequently, artists come in with these fully produced demos, that have a lot of great elements in them. And a lot of times I'll take those demos and I will import all of those audio files from the demos into a brand new Pro Tools session, my session. And I'll start replacing things and start taking things away, or maybe we'll do some type of rearrangement of sections or whatever. But I'll always have all those demo tracks hidden, right? And in the case of Donnie's record, the record I'm working on now, I'm mixing, and there's certain elements that were in the demo that we just, for whatever reason, didn't capture it again, right? So consequently, I've got all of these old demo tracks hidden underneath all of these new tracks. So I can literally just open up and just pull things out in little sections from his demo tracks to get that back. So, as far as making Donnie's record and a lot of records nowadays, is we're taking these demos and we're just stripping them away and replacing parts, making parts better, keeping parts and whatnot. So, demos are really, that's the actual start of the record nowadays, and unfortunately, not every musician has great gear at home, to deal with, and nor do they even know how to use it, which is totally fine. They shouldn't have to know how to use it. So consequently, sometimes these demo tracks that I get in, they're pretty noisy. There's little clicks and pops. They might be harsh and thin sounding, and when I put it into my session with all the new stuff that we've been doing, that's big sounding and thick, and it's not harsh. I have to do some shaping of these demo tracks, and some of it's pretty drastic. But all of it, it ends up fitting in the mix, and you can't tell that was from a demo,
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's all about the song anyway, right?
Right. Yes.
It's not about, how big I made that guitar sound or how big the drum sound or any of that stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with the song. So if it was good enough for the demo, then it's damn well going to be good enough for the record, as long as it has that same vibe, and that whatever we're looking for.
Sure. And then you add, obviously, different other music, other instruments, other musicians' performances to the song.
Yeah, as the tracking process is going, new ideas pop into our head. Maybe some new idea will spark another new idea that will negate the idea that we had 2 weeks ago about one particular part. Right. And you have to be humble enough, or not humble enough, but you have to be open-minded enough, right, to be like, oh yeah, that part that we put in 2 weeks ago that we worked really hard on, this is better. Let's ditch that. So, that's been a lot of the process on Donnie's record too, is we are mulling over things, and we're we're redoing things that maybe we spent 2 or 3 days on or 5 days on, you know? I mean,
yeah, but stuff that's on the cutting room floor, to say, so to speak, is probably still very cool as well, right? So
fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it's really, really great. Everything that I've recorded onto the hard drive, that we've walked away from, everything has been really, really great and up to our standards, production wise and performance wise. It's just that once we get some of these other ideas in there and some of these other instruments, now we might not need that anymore, you know? For instance, with Roger Manning's tracks, when he sent some stuff over, there was one section of the song that he did some brilliant stuff in that we weren't necessarily expecting. And we ended up muting some of the stuff that we had in there before we got Roger's tracks, because now, you know, that's stepping on Roger's tracks, right? Even though Roger was very, very, very conscious not to step on anything, you know, heavy-handed that we already had. It's just that Roger's stuff was a little bit better in that particular section, right?
yeah, exactly.
So things get reworked over and over and over and over. And that's the way I like to make records. That's the way I was taught how to make a record.
Okay.
I started off early on in my career at a studio called Chicago Tracks. And this is in the early 90s. And there was a band called Ministry that had been camped out there for years, right?
Sure.
This is their home base. And me being from San Diego, I didn't know who this band was. I had no idea who Ministry was. I never heard industrial metal or any of that stuff. That was a Chicago thing. You know, that was not, you know, in my circles anyway, was not anywhere near LA or San Diego. And I started out with those guys as an intern, and then over the years ended up working with them as an engineer, moving down to Texas with them, and there's a giant story there. But the way that they made records is they would labor over these parts and whatnot, and unless it was dead nuts perfect, they wouldn't move on.
Really? Wow.
We would, you know, there were times where, you know, I think, you know, we spent maybe a couple of weeks on just guitars on one song.
Wow.
You know, and, you know, maybe five days of those 2 weeks were just getting guitar sounds.
Amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, this is back in the early 90s when we had budget, right?
Yes. Right.
You know, Warner Brothers was really strong behind this band at the time. And that record took 18 months to make, if I recall correctly.
Wow. And that's not usual, right?
No. I mean, you know, unless you're Fleetwood Mac doing Rumors or something like that, you know, that was a little bit out of the ordinary, but still, you know, back then it wasn't out of the ordinary to take 6 months to do a record.
Okay.
And to go into a studio that you were spending $1,500 a day on, right?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that was a normal major label record budget. Right.
Yeah.
That's not here anymore.
Right. Which in those days, still with the record companies in the music business, that eventually did come out of the band's pocket or money anyway, didn't it?
I guess so. I don't know. I've never been a part of that section of the business.
Yeah. Got it. That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's right. Yeah.
Yep. I don't even know. I do know that, you know, Ministry was making enough money to warrant that type of budget.
Sure.
At the time.
Got it. Yeah.
You know, Warner's is not, you know, full of idiots over there.
Right. No, exactly. They know what they're doing. Well, let's talk a little bit about your story and like, how did you even get here, Mike? When did music and the love of music start for you? And I know you play as well, but you know, you also went on a different road with engineering. Tell me about your story.
I guess I was about 15, and a friend of mine's dad played guitar, and this friend of mine got a brand new Strat for Christmas one year. And Brandon had already known how to play. Brandon Kirkbride is his name. Hey, Brandon. Brandon had already known how to play a little bit and whatnot. And, I would kind of go over there and, after school and, like, wow, this is awesome. And I was always into music anyway. I mean, prior to this, I was, I should probably back up. I used to study records as far as the lyrics, credits. I used to study credits like crazy. That's how I even knew that there was a job for me, right?
Right.
Like, oh, wow, there's all these people that are involved. This is amazing. I'd see some of the same names, as far as, engineers and, producers over the span of records that I was listening to. And, I was also that kid that had those little like cassette recorder, and it had a realistic microphone that was with it. And I'd turn on the radio and, find a hit song or whatever that I was into, and I'd record it, right? So I could have it over and over, because I was, 10 or 11 years old. I didn't have any money, and my mom wasn't, going to take me out to the record store and buy me records. She was too busy working. So I was that kid, and I've always loved music. My dad, turned me on to the Rolling Stones, Bob Seger, when I was a kid. And Zeppelin, of course, with my brother and all my cousins, and Hendrix and all, all those normal ones, Black Sabbath. And I don't know, I guess after I became really good friends with Brandon, I just started playing guitar, and he was teaching me things. And then finally my mom bought me one for Christmas. And I ended up joining, I ended up graduating from high school and going to the local college over there for some music courses, and like theory and whatnot. And I wasn't really digging it. It was really all kind of boring to me. And, some of it I knew, some of it I didn't know. And I was confused already. And I was just like, it was a little frustrating, right?
Sure.
I don't think I was that good. Okay. But there was a guy that I had met in class there that we got along great. And he was from Chicago. And he had a 4-track, Foss-6 little cassette 4-track. And he had a drum machine, and he had amps, he had guitars, and it was like, wow, I've never messed with this stuff. What is this about?
He had a whole studio, it sounds like.
It's amazing. And this was like 1990, 1989. But he had no idea really how to run it. He knew a couple things that he showed me. He's like, I don't know how to do any of the rest, Mike. So I ended up being so enamored with this 4-track and this drum machine. And I really, really, really got into it. And I really became good friends with this guy. So mid-semester, we were like, this is lame. This is boring. And it was his idea to come out to Chicago, where he's from, and go start a band.
Okay.
All right, fine. I was 18.
You were 18. Okay. Yeah.
Like, fine, dude, let's go. I'd grown up in LA and San Diego, and I'd done the whole Hollywood thing throughout high school. I'd gotten into drugs. I had gotten into, just bad, I needed a change, right? So I left, and I think I had $100 or $200, and his family was here and whatnot, but we ended up finding this junkyard that had an office for rent, and it was in this really bad neighborhood, but it was cheap, and we figured we could set up our little studio in there and set up our band, spot there. We could rehearse there, and we could have parties and stuff. So that's what we did
in Chicago.
It's on the south side. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
It was really, it actually turned out to be fantastic. I made some lifelong local friends down there that are just great people. But for a kid from San Diego coming into that, was a little shocking.
Sure. So you graduate from school and you go back to Chicago. What happens from there?
Well, I think I I left Southern California on a Thursday, and I drove back to Chicago by myself, and I got in on a Sunday, and Monday I went out studio searching for an internship.
Wow.
And I went to Chicago Tracks first and met with them, and he had told me, he's like, hey, if this is the first studio that you've gone to, do yourself a favor and go to a few more and just see if you really want to work here or not. And if you do want to work here, you can start tomorrow morning. Call me tonight. Like,
that's cool.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll go look at some other places. So I'd gone to, a few of the other bigger studios in town, and a couple I got a weird vibe from, like, this wasn't as cozy as that first place I went to. Another place, this is a funny story. This is a really famous studio. It was called Paragon.
Okay.
And I think prior to me coming to town, and during the 70s and 80s, they'd done all the Styx records. That was their big thing.
Yeah.
And they'd done just a bunch of stuff from that 70s, 80s era. And it was really, really well known. And I go in there and I ask, if they have any internships available. And the woman at the desk hands me a clipboard with a pen, and she says, here, fill this out, or take this test or whatever.
Okay.
I'm like, what the hell is that?
Right. Like a medical appointment, intake, right?
I do. I sit down in their waiting room, and this waiting room is just covered with gold records, right? And I'm like looking around like, oh my God, I grew up with that record. I grew up with that record. I grew up with that record. And I start taking this test, and it's all these audio questions, and they're all very simple. And toward the end, I get to this one question that it was asking me something that made zero sense to me completely. It was this formula that had no rhyme or reason. And I remember looking at it, just being baffled, being like, man, all right, this doesn't make any sense to me. I literally wrote, I said, this makes no sense. Boom. And I go hand it to the lady, and like 5 minutes later, Marty, the studio owner, comes out from some other door. He's like, are you Mike? Like, yeah. He's like, come here, I want to talk to you. And he pulls me in his office. He's like, you are the first person to get this answer right in like 7 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. So it was a trick question they put in there.
Yeah, of course it was, So I ended up talking with Marty for a while, and I really got a great vibe from Marty. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, I ended up calling Tracks back when I got home that night and being like, hey, can I start in the morning? So I did. I started the next morning. And they threw me in to go clean up Studio A, which had been a mess. And there's the client is still in there and whatnot, but don't worry about it. Just go in there and clean up. Well, I go in there, and there's this dude that looks like a pirate on the back couch. And I think he's shooting up dope. I'm not quite sure yet. I don't want to stare.
Yeah.
There's an engineer there that looks like he's been up for at least a week, and he's sleeping at the studio.
Wow.
And I look at the rack that I'm supposed to clean up, the top of the island, and it's just filled with just all kinds of garbage, from everything from dirty needles to Slurpee cups to overflowing ashtrays. Oh, there's a pile of heroin right there. Stay away from that. And don't touch that needle, dude. I'll take care of that. That's what the pirate was saying to me. He's telling me, he'll clean that stuff up.
Yeah.
And, so whatever, once again, I was really humble, and I just kind of went in there and just like did my thing, cleaned up, and went and started cleaning bathrooms. And then I think I got asked to go on a food run, and then, so, it was things like that, that you'd kind of get tested at these different studios.
Yeah.
Right? how much can you handle? Are you going to be able to handle this? Because here's this client, this pirate, who's got a bunch of money. He's got a huge record label behind him. He's really, really talented. And he's shacked up here. And yeah, he's doing a bunch of dope. And, that's just the way it is. If you can hang, great. If not, it's okay too. But you should know, and you'll figure that out on your own. You know? And I saw a lot of kids come in and see what was going on, and, you wouldn't see him the next day, or, we would, our client, Mr. Pirate, would let the owner know that, hey, I don't want so-and-so here because he's a little, he's kind of sketching me out type of thing. I think he's, a lot of drugs, there's a lot of paranoia going on. But amongst all that dark stuff of drugs and everything, there was a lot of really, really great records that were being made.
And that was probably the stuff that helped you stay, as well as having a kid, needing to take care of your family, all of that, right?
Yeah. The drugs didn't bother me so much, because I'd kind of been through it earlier on in life. And I just knew that just wasn't an option for me. And I was there to work. I've got a baby. Right. And, mind you, my first 4 months at the studio were unpaid.
You were interning, right?
As an intern, right? For 4 months, 4.5 months, I think.
Wow.
And it got to the point where, I'm spending 12 hours a day plus at the studio 7 days a week. I'm sleeping there, but that's what you had to do. You had to make yourself indispensable to where if you weren't there, the client was going to be like, hey, where's Mike? I need this done. And they're going to go to the studio and it was like, dude, why is Mike not here? Like, oh, well, Mike's an intern. He's not. Like, well, okay, you better start paying Mike so they can get him on the schedule because I need him.
Right.
Here's a client that's paying a bunch of money to be in the studio for 6 months or a year. Right. So that's what you had to do. And I think that's still what you have to do is you have to make yourself indispensable. And I think it's even harder nowadays because bands and artists have equipment. They have a little bit of know-how how to do some of this stuff. And they don't need guys like us right from the get-go like they used to. Bands used to have to come into our place and do demos.
Right. Yes.
If they did have a 4-track, they didn't, it wasn't that great. It was good for a sketch pad, right? There's no plugins. There's no outboard gear. All that stuff was unattainable back then. So they would have to come to us and spend, say $1,200 on a demo, and they get 2 days in the studio, and we knock out 5 songs. There's your demo. Here, go get some gigs with it. And they go get their gigs, and they'd save their money and make a record.
Right.
And then I guess in 2013, 2014, a really good friend of mine throughout the years called me up and said that some friends of his are building a post-production studio here in Chicago, and they're filmmakers, and he grew up with them, and he's going to be, or he is their chief technical officer.
Okay.
And his name's Paul Mano. He's a great guy. He's a wonderful friend. And I told Paul, I says, well, dude, when it comes time for any audio work to be done over there, they had been doing a lot of film editing and CGI and like some visual effects work there, and they weren't really doing any audio yet. So maybe it was a year or two later, he calls me up. He's like, dude, we need you. We need you. I got a team from Warner Brothers here, but we need a little bit extra help. And I want, why don't you come on down and meet everybody and see if, So I went down there. I think it was like the next day. He called me on a Thursday. I went down there on Friday morning, met with everybody and got along great with everybody. And, kind of told everybody, I says, I'm from the record business. I'm not from the movie business, but I know how to run all this gear that you're using. I may not know your workflow and some of your terminology, but, if you're willing to take me on and teach me some of that stuff, I've got the other bases covered. And they ended up hiring me on. And I ended up becoming, a part of their studio, as, the the sound engineer for the Wachowskis' place. Whenever we're doing post-production, we have a team from Warner Brothers that comes in, like 7 people, and I work with them, and I work with the studio, and then I kind of like liaison between them and the studio, and help them integrate, and then pick up any slack that they need to be done, whether it's editing, or like recording some location stuff outside that we need for certain scenes or whatever, helping with this ADR dialogue stuff that we do. And for Sense8, that show is filmed literally around the planet.
Right.
And we have actors that are around the planet, and these actors live in these places. So when we need to do dialogue replacement, which we have to do sometimes because there's a noisy set, or there's generators running, or there's a piece of dialogue that's not coming out right, and it's part of the story. Dialogue's number one when it comes to filmmaking, right? We'll have to bring them in. We'll have to do some of these lines over again in a controlled environment. Well, usually we're doing that in London or LA, New York, house proper ADR facilities. But we have actors in Nairobi, right? Yeah. We have actors in. There was a session we did in Colombia this past year, which actually went great. South Korea, we have an actor there, so there's a language barrier and the whole time thing too. And we're also hooking up in real time my machine along with their machine, and we're like able to work in real time with the actor and with the engineer on that side, and on this side I've got our directors and our dialogue supervisor with me, and I'm in charge of the technical aspects of doing this hookup.
Incredible. So you're still like in LA or somewhere, and they're in Colombia or Nairobi, and in the studio there. Wow.
Yep. Yeah, it's been challenging, but it's been challenging for everybody on that show. That's not a normal show. Shows don't normally get filmed around the planet, especially like a Netflix series.
You mentioned Buddy Guy a few minutes ago.
That's a crazy one. I had gotten a call from the studio owner one evening, and he says, "Hey, Mike, can you come down early tomorrow morning for a session? I've got a producer from Nashville that wants to come up here and record some guitar." Like, yeah, dude, yeah, let's go. I was looking for work, man, and so I go down. I think it's like a 9 or 9:30 start, which is just crazy, So I get down there, and I'm setting the room up, and I call this producer, and I ask him. I says, do you have a hard drive that you're bringing with, or do we need me to set up a session? What do you need me to do? How like prior to you getting here, and are you bringing your own amps? What's up? And he says, "Oh yeah, I've got amps. Both of us are about ready to get in a cab right now. I got hard drives. I got everything. Just hold off until I get there." All right, fine. So he gets there, and he says, he like mutters in our conversation. I had heard him say something like, "Buddy and I are getting in a cab right now." And the only thing I knew was that we were going to do a guitar, right? And it's this producer from Nashville. But he said, "Buddy." Like, all right, you don't say buddy unless like your friend, or you're talking about your actual buddy, right? This Buddy Guy. And so I told my assistant at the time, I got off the phone, I says, "Dude, here we go. I think it's Buddy Guy, dude." He's like, "Really?" And he was shocked. He's like, "Oh," I'm like, "Dude, just chill out. It's cool. It's fine." So anyway, Buddy Guy and Tom Hambridge walk through the door. Tom hands me this hard drive that says George Thorogood on it. I'm just about shit my pants. And then here comes Buddy's tech and his manager and a photographer, Paul Natkin, shows up. And Paul had gotten me. That's a different story. I'll tell you that later.
Okay.
So Buddy's tech comes in with this amp, and he's got some amp I've never heard of, Chicago Blue or something. I don't even know what it's called. And he plops it down, and I put a microphone in front of it, and I set it up, and I got like a room mic going as well. And I go into the control room, and Buddy's, playing around, just warming up, and I'm pulling the microphone up, and I'm getting a sound, and I'm tweaking things, and I go out and move the mic, and this whole time I've got Buddy's tech, his manager, the photographer, and Tom Hambridge, the producer, all standing in back of me, silent and just staring at me. And I'm kind of like thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like, shit, like, because I'm really trying to get a great sound here. This is a funny guy, okay?
Funny guy, yeah.
And the sound was pretty good, I thought. And, I kind of got to the point where I was like, well, I need some feedback, And I kind of turn around, and everyone just like gives me this blank stare in silence. And I'm waiting for somebody to be like, hey, dude, that sounds great.
Right.
Nobody says anything. I says, well, what do you guys think? They're like, well, it sounds like Buddy. I'm like, oh, fuck, let's go. All right. It was me overthinking things, and getting in my own head, and, conjuring up this anxiety for absolutely zero reason. Right. But, I do it to myself a lot. And I think a lot of people do it to themselves.
Sure.
Out of the ordinary.
Right.
So anyway, we start playing the track back for Buddy and showing him the section that we need him to play over and whatnot. And he's just not feeling it at all. I mean, like, it was just way out. It was like, shit, we got an issue here.
Yeah.
And I turn and I looked at Tom, and he's like, hey, can you get me some headphones out there? And I can go out there and be with him in the room, and I can kind of direct him.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. So Tom goes out there, and Tom's counting him into the solo, and he's giving him direction, with, hand gestures and when to break down, when to, okay, build it up. And then he's counting him out of the solo too. Right. Well, I don't know. We must've done 5 takes, and Buddy's like watching him, and Tom's doing all this stuff, and Buddy's just like kerplunk, kerplunk, kerplunk. It's just like, and I'm in the control room with the tech and the manager, and we're all looking at each other like, what the hell's not going good? Must have been the 6th take, or I don't know, somewhere around there. Buddy closes his eyes before Tom can count him in. And he comes in at the right time, and he just starts wailing. And it was amazing. And his eyes are closed the whole time. And he's picking the guitar up, and he's making all these wild sounds and this great solo. And Tom kind of like looks at me, and I'm like, shh. And I'm like, dude, just let it go. And that was the solo.
Wow.
He had his eyes closed the entire time.
Yeah.
And that was just one of those lightning in a bottle type things. And that song was High Heeled Sneakers. I believe is the first song on George's last record. I think it's 2012 Michigan Avenue, South Michigan Avenue. It's the old address of the old Chess Records.
Yeah.
Named the record.
So this was Buddy playing a solo on George Thorogood's album.
Yep. Then here's another interesting thing. This one really blew me away. Is after we were done with that, Tom hands me another hard drive, and it just says Quinn on it, right? He's like, hey, we're gonna have Buddy play a solo on one of these songs from a different client that I'm working with. Like, all right, cool, and put it up, and we have like an extra 20 minutes, so I put it up, and it's this cool, slower blues track, and I like turn around to Tom, like, wow, this is cool. And he's like, dude, pull up the vocal. You're really gonna trip. I pull up the vocal, and it sounds like a little kid singing. It's good. It's really good. And I look at Tom like, what? He's like, that's who's playing the guitar. and the guitar was like crazy good. Like I had no idea. I mean, some of these licks that were coming out of the speakers were really, really great. And Tom says, yeah, this kid's, 10 years old. And Buddy and he have like kind of like got this thing, and they've been friends for a while. The kid's been jamming with Buddy, and Buddy's going to play a solo on this song. So we do it and whatnot, and the session's over with, and I don't know, it must have been a couple months later, and I see this video of this kid, Quinn Sullivan. This is who it is, right? You know this kid who it is now, don't you?
I think so.
Oh, you should look him up. He's like Buddy Guy's little prodigy right now. He Quinn's parents brought him to one of Buddy's gig when Quinn was like 7 years old or something, right? And Quinn was playing guitar. He's a huge Beatles freak. He's a huge fan of Buddy. He had this polka dot guitar strap. He's this little kid. And he went up there and he started jamming with Buddy. And Buddy was like, what do we have here? So since then, Buddy has taken him under his wing. And I think Quinn is he's like 16 now. And he's jamming with, Clapton. He's jamming with all these guys. Buddy's turned him on to everybody, He did a big jam with him and Clapton and B.B. King years ago. I mean, nuts, dude. If you're not hip to Quinn Sullivan, you should check him out.
Totally.
The kid's really, really good. But there's a cool little crazy, unexpected session story for you. I had no idea that was happening when
right. No idea Buddy Guy was coming in the studio that day. And, rightfully so. I think we can have a little bit of anxiety, intimidation, whatever, with some of our music heroes, right? So
totally.
Yeah, totally normal.
Yes. It happens all too often.
Yeah. Did you get to work with George himself, George Thorogood?
Nope.
No, just mixed.
Which would have been nice, but at the same time, Buddy Guy would have been the star in my eyes in that session, if regardless.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
You have Hendrix there.
That's it.
Shadow Buddy on that particular day.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Tell me some of your favorite engineers, sound mixing. I mean, there's been some incredible ones. Who are some of the ones that have influenced you?
Oh, it's really, really crazy you ask that, because somebody that I work with now is one of those people. And he's a mastering engineer that I send all my stuff to. And he wasn't a mastering engineer when I first had become aware of this guy. But I'd gone to school out in Los Angeles, and my teacher, who was a working professional. I know we'd spoken about the whole teacher professional thing, and this guy did it half and half. He'd leave our school, and then he'd go do sessions until 2 a.m, and then come do class at 10 a.m. He was one of those guys. He was great. And he's the director now of that school, I believe. Steve Miller, Los Angeles Recording School. But Steve turned us on. In one of our classes, he was like, hey, I want to demonstrate, how to, do this or this or that. And he played us this record that had just come out by a band called the Archangels. And the Archangels was a band that it was comprised of Double Trouble, Stevie Ray's rhythm section. This is after Stevie died.
Okay.
Along with Doyle Bramhall Jr. And Charlie Sexton.
Wow.
Right? A fantastic lineup. And I didn't know, I knew about Double Trouble, but I didn't really know about Charlie, and after doing some research, like, oh yeah, Charlie I think he was signed to Mercury in the 80s, and they dressed him up, and he's got this big hair, and so it's totally not who he is. But my teacher turned us all on in class one day to this record, and I fell in love with it sonically. Production, the songs, everything about it was just so good. And the mixes were fantastic. And it was recorded and mixed by this guy named Dave McNair. And I, always had that guy's name in the back of my mind throughout all these years and whatnot. And I was working with the band, 7 years ago or so, and one of the guys in the band was like, "Hey, maybe we'll have my friend master this guy that I know." I was like, "Well, who is it?" Dave McNair. Like, wait a second, dude. Dave McNair. We start, trading information. I'm like, you got to be shitting me. So he's like, no, dude. So Dave mastered that, and it was so good. It was great. And since then, I had to call him and talk with him. And we chatted for a while. We've become good friends. And he does everything that I do. If I've got a budget for mastering it, I'm sending it to Dave. So there's one, but the person that really got me intrigued about equipment and some of the boutique and esoteric high-end studio gear was before I had even gone to school. I was still in the rehearsal space with the Fossex 8-track, not knowing what I'm doing, but knowing enough to get myself in trouble. And I was getting tattooed. And the owner of the tattoo shop was getting tattooed by one of the guys that worked there. So the owner leaves and he goes to some concert. And I think it was The Cult in Maryville, Indiana. And this is like 1990, 91, something like that. And he comes back from the show. And now granted, this tattoo studio, there's tigers there. There's alligators there. There's cobras. We had a bear. And I'm not exaggerating one bit. If you want to look it up, his name is Roy Boy, and he's in Gary, Indiana. And he had a license for all these animals. And there was tigers in the basement.
So you're not talking about these as images of tattoos. You're talking real live tigers and cobras.
He had white tigers. I mean, it was just incredible. So, I was hanging out there a lot because I loved animals and whatnot. And at that particular time, he had 4 tiger cubs that were only like 4 months old. So we were bottle feeding them and whatnot. And so anyway, he comes back from this concert with this guy that I guess is the singer of the opening band for The Cult, and this guy wants to get a tattoo. And this guy is like, he's this short dude with these long dreadlocks, and he's a really super nice guy. He's really sweaty though. He just done a show, right? Yeah. And he wants to, Roy wanted to take some pictures of him with the tigers and the snakes and the bear and stuff like that. So I was helping Roy with all the tigers and helping this guy, calming him down. Like, dude, don't worry about it. I'm here. I got your back. I know how to deal with these things. I've been hanging out here for a while. If one of them gets rowdy, I just sock them in the nose and they're done. And so we take some pictures with them, and then we go back to the tattooing, and I'm getting tattooed, and this guy is getting tattooed by Roy right next to me, and he's getting this purple iris on his butt, right? So he's laying down on his stomach with his head toward me, and he's got his pants down, and we just start talking. And he's a super nice guy. And it was kind of awkward, but, whatever. Hey,
it's rock and roll. You go with it. Right?
For him than me. Right. And so we start talking, and I start telling him, he asked me if I play music and whatnot. And I tell him, yeah, I got this little 8-track. I mess around. I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, oh, man, you guys should get like an old Helios console or an old Telefunken microphones or an old Neve this or that. And he's spouting this Neve, Helios, and Telefunken. These are the 3 key things that he was talking about, like recording gear wise. And those names never left me for some reason. I had never heard those names before. And so tattooing's done. It's late. And this guy gets back on his tour bus and bails. He gives everybody a hug before he leaves, and that's the last we see of him. And I caught his name, and I went out, and he told me, he's like, go out and buy my record tomorrow. It's in stores and stuff. Like, wow, cool. Got a record out, dude. That's pretty cool. I go out and buy his record. His name's Lenny Kravitz, right?
Holy cow. Yeah.
And this is his first record, Let Love Rule. and my fucking jaw hit the floor.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh shit. My world got turned upside down.
Awesome.
Because now I knew Neve, Helios, and Telefunken.
Who's on that dream list for you, Mike? I mean, you're making a living in the music business, you're finding a balance, you're working with great artists, and you're finishing the album with Donnie V. Who's on that dream list of who you still love to work with at this point?
It's weird because I don't think about that much. And I'll tell you why I don't think about that much. I've been, I think, somewhat disillusioned, I think, as everybody is, with their musical heroes, whether it's or a filmmaker or anybody that you don't know and you just know by their work. It can be disappointing, right? In fact, a case in point, going back to the Archangels, right? Charlie Sexton, Dave McNair did that record, that whole deal. That record's always been huge, right? In my book. Well, a few years ago, I was at a venue and Charlie was playing that night, and I get to the venue and I'm there with my buddy, and we get into the elevator, and lo and behold, Charlie gets in the elevator with us to go upstairs to where the stage is. And my buddy looks at me because he knows how much I love him. And he looks at me, he's like, what are you gonna do? And I was like, shh. Nothing. Absolutely silent, quiet, like I don't know who he is. I just want to enjoy the show. Looking back on it, maybe I should have said hey and given him a hug or something, but right. Probably what I would have done is the problem. I probably would have crushed him. I'll tell you another story about doing that. Jeff Beck. Mm-hmm. I was working at a studio in Hollywood, and at the Sunset Marquis, which is a hotel in Hollywood, and at the hotel there's a studio in the basement. And it's a nice place because you can stay at the hotel and nobody knows that you're there. It's really off the beaten path. It's tiny. And you don't have to leave the premises to go work, right? You can just go take the elevator downstairs to the basement parking garage. There's a studio down there that's fantastic, and go down there and do work and then come back up. And so I had been working down there all day. And the assistant, I was drinking at the hotel bar later that night. And the assistant that had been with us all day is looking for me at the bar. He's like, Mike. I'm like, hey, dude, come over here. He's like, hey, dude, follow me. I got somebody for you to meet. He's down in the studio. He's hanging out with Jeb Lieberman, who's the studio owner. And we go down there, and he opens the door, and there's Jeff Beck.
Wow.
I almost shit my pants,
right.
And, it turns out Jesse, the assistant, grew up with Jeff as a family friend. So it was nothing for, hey, Jeff, I want you to meet my buddy type of thing. But he didn't prep me at all, right? And I had a few drinks in me. I was revved up, man. I had just done a really big day at work. I was relaxing. I was drinking. And I go to shake Jeff's hand, and he's a little guy. I'm not a little guy. And I nearly brought him to his knees.
Oh, no.
I crushed his hand.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And it was right hand. It was like, oh. And I shook his hand all,
Right. You're excited, right?
Whoa. And I was like, oh, shit. He's like, I'm sorry. He's like, mate, you're going to ruin my career. Oh, my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you don't want to be known as the guy who broke Jeff Beck's hand. Right?
And it came real close, dude. I mean, I was so stoked to see this guy.
Sure. Another music hero, right?
I had a few drinks in me, I had a good buzz on, and I just went honk.
Last question then, Mike. For someone who wants to become a sound engineer, producer in the music business, what advice would you give them?
Don't do it.
Run away.
Although that's what I was told too. Prior to me going to school, my uncle had a friend that owned a studio, Lion's Share in Los Angeles, where Neil Diamond records were done there, and like a successful studio. And he had spoken with his buddy about his nephew wants to go to school for this, and he's like, "Don't let him do it. Don't let him do it." So I didn't heed that warning. But I honestly feel like it's a different climate out there than it was when I was, at least when I was a kid. There were studios that you could go get an internship at. I don't really, I don't know what to tell kids nowadays, other than try to get an internship somewhere and make yourself indispensable, and shut up. Please shut up. Right. And try to be extremely proactive. Right? Try to foresee what the artist might need, or the engineer or the producer, and whether that is food,
right.
Why don't you, if you think people are going to be getting hungry, why don't you go grab the menu book from up front so you don't have to go searching for it and just have it ready. Or that could be, making sure that a certain microphone is available for vocals for the next 2 hours, and that the Studio B is not going to be using it. Or maybe that's, prepping for the next session and, making sure that the room is super clean for that next session that comes in, and do it better than the other guy. I think it's all common sense in any industry, as far as being proactive, being humble, don't say too much, absorb everything, watch what's going on, read the room, and be honest with yourself when you read the room. Okay. Don't read the room and be like, don't think that you're hot shit, and try to, I guess, just try to get a relationship with bands and with artists and whatnot. I mean, I've not gotten any work from having a website. I've not gotten any work from a Facebook page or anything like that. It's all been clientele throughout the years, staying in touch with people. And first and foremost, I think, is just being a good people person, right? People have to want to hang out with you to hire you. If Donnie and I didn't get along as well as we do, I wouldn't be able to spend 3 months living with him, and vice versa on his side too.
Sure.
So you have to be a likable person. You just can't be that, and you cannot be an introvert. You have to be somewhat extroverted. And very humble. You got to be humble and stay humble. Nobody likes that arrogant guy. You know what I mean? And try to let your work speak for itself. Yeah. So.
It's great advice, great music and life advice, I think. Mike Tholen, thank you so much for being on Musicians on the Record.
Thank you, David. Take care.